For decades, the United States acted as the guarantor of global stability. Today, it has become the primary driver of geopolitical uncertainty. Political scientist Ian Bremmer maps this exact transition in his annual Top Risk Report, providing a rigorous analytical framework for the 2026 geopolitical environment. This shift is a voluntary policy rejection by American leadership. They are actively walking away from the free trade agreements and collective security architectures they spent the last 70 years building. This schematic represents what Bremmer calls a G0 environment. As the central unipolar anchor fades out, we are left with a system entirely devoid of reliable global leadership. That structural vacuum generates immediate systemic risk. Smaller nations that once relied on a global policeman are forced to navigate a highly unpredictable economic and security landscape on their own. Regional powers are reacting rationally, abandoning their reliance on Western architectures to secure their own interests. Because the rules-based international order is being dismantled by its primary architect, every defense and economic strategy on Earth must be rewritten. Before we map out the data behind this shift, subscribe to the CEO Brief to stay informed on global macro trends. To see exactly how a G0 world operates in practice, we look at the Persian Gulf. This narrow transit corridor dictates the mathematics of the global energy supply. Absolute control over the Strait of Hormuz translates directly to leverage over the global economy. A critical vulnerability within this regional energy matrix is Kharg Island, an export terminal responsible for the vast majority of local oil shipments. Localized actors understand that maintaining influence over this specific choke point provides immense leverage against the United States and global markets. By weaponizing maritime trade routes, localized forces can restrict transit, creating immediate spikes in global crude prices to extract policy concessions. The United States possesses absolute conventional military supremacy, yet it struggles to project actionable authority to resolve this localized standoff. Eliminating top-tier commanders and engaging in high-visibility assassinations has failed to restore long-term regional deterrence. Adversarial forces adapt by decentralizing their command structure down to local operators, rendering traditional centralized military pressure obsolete. Sending aircraft carriers into a theater designed for asymmetric disruption cannot solve a localized energy standoff in a G0 environment. Recognizing this structural limitation, international powers are actively hedging their bets against American unpredictability. The historical expectation of a unified Western bloc steering global governance is fracturing. Look at this emerging map of alliances. We are seeing a distinct transactional bloc forming between the UAE, Israel, the United States, and India. They share specific national security objectives and bypass traditional diplomacy in favor of direct technology and capital transfers. Simultaneously, a parallel counter-network is solidifying among Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. This second alignment carries immense strategic weight. As the regional nuclear power, Pakistan's defense relationship with Saudi Arabia introduces a nuclear deterrent into the calculations of this transactional bloc. Neither of these networks rely on the United Nations or NATO to function. In the absence of a global guarantor, security is now brokered through closed, hyper-regional defense architectures. The retreat from international leadership is driven directly by domestic politics, which paralyze the ability to project long-term power abroad. American voters are acutely sensitive to macroeconomic indicators, dictating the boundaries of available military options. When domestic inflation and fuel costs rise, the electorate's tolerance for underwriting distant foreign interventions collapses. This creates a stark political paradox. An administration commands the world's most advanced military, but completely lacks the domestic political capital required to use it. Strategy is therefore reduced to short-term, high-visibility actions that look good in headlines, rather than operations aimed at sustainable regional stabilization. The relentless pressure of biennial election cycles strips Washington of its ability to execute decadal planning. Deep internal polarization and economic volatility ensure that American global leadership remains paralyzed into the foreseeable future. While Washington focuses on the immediate news cycle, the actual long-term battlefield is industrial resource extraction. Bremmer identifies this dynamic as overpowered, where absolute control over critical minerals dictates the trajectory of advanced global economies. Elements like lithium, antimony, and rare earths are strict physical requirements for both consumer electronics and advanced defense weaponry. China has spent the last several decades deliberately avoiding military volatility to focus on securing these exact supply chains. Cornering the global critical technology market requires massive, uninterrupted capital allocation at an immense scale. The strategic objective extends beyond raw extraction. It requires establishing a total monopoly on the highly complex infrastructure needed to reprocess those materials. Western economies, fixated on quarterly earnings and just-in-time globalization, failed to build competing multi-decade industrial policies. If a competitor decides to restrict access to these localized supply chains, Western technological manufacturing grinds to an immediate halt. Owning the physical inputs of the modern economy grants a nation the unilateral power to set standards and control market access. Traditional powers react to cyclical crises. Strategic competitors are methodically conquering the physical architecture of the future global economy. Overlaying regional defense pacts onto new resource supply chains erases the post-Cold War era. We are looking at a decentralized, highly transactional G0 reality. As domestic constraints force the U.S. inward, allies and adversaries are locking into alternative economic frameworks. Geopolitical leverage in the next decade involves securing these physical corridors, while simultaneously dominating the supply chains and technological infrastructure that run through them. Surviving this transition requires navigating a system where the consensus-based leadership of the G7 has been replaced by a G0 environment. In this vacuum, power is brokered through competing, regional transactional architectures. The global architecture is changing. To understand what comes next, subscribe for our upcoming brief and leave your analysis in the comments below.